Sebastien Lecornu, who is the outgoing Prime Minister of France, says that Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, can name a new prime minister in the next 48 hours. He can do that. He may not do that. Where does that leave us? What does this mean for his government?
Scarlet, things are a little bit clearer now than they were earlier today, but not much. What we know is that the theory that fresh elections could be called for the National Assembly looks less likely than it did this morning, for example. What Sebastien Lecornu has just said on French television is that he believes there is now a political situation that allows Emmanuel Macron to name a new Prime Minister and take the next spin on this wheel that we've been on since June of last year of trying to build a minority coalition in Parliament that's able to pass a French budget. Now, he did this after the 48 hours of intense consultations with political leaders from across the political spectrum, not all parties, but most. And what he was trying to do was see if among those groups he could find enough support for central ideas that he believes that could lead to a budget. Essentially, he wants somebody else to take the reins from here. That's what he's told the President, Emmanuel Macron. He came to this interview this evening on French television straight from the Élysée Palace, where he spent an hour and 40 minutes with the President, briefing him on what he'd learned over the past 2 days. He now expects the President to name somebody else to take on the job, to lead those discussions. He was asked repeatedly, should it be a candidate from the left party? He said it's up to the President to decide. Should it be a technocratic Prime Minister? It's up to the President to decide. He has made it clear, though, is that nobody who's going to be in this government should have presidential ambitions for the 2027 presidential election. It looks like he's pointing towards a sort of technocratic arrangement, but very much involving the politicians who are in the National Assembly now, who are on the political scene, to be able to put that compromise together, because they have some pretty big issues they have to decide, and the calendar on this budget is already running very, very tight. So the rush is to try and get something done in time that can be passed through Parliament and actually keep the public finances running over into next year, avoiding the sort of emergency measures that we saw at the end of last year, which, as we know, didn't go down very well on the bond markets.
Can investors force the hand of the centrist parties who must decide whether to play ball with Lecornu or, for that matter, Macron?
Look, that's a really good question, because what we've seen so far is a little bit of tension in markets, but not something that our own economists or any of the market analysts that we've been speaking to would describe as a fiscal or financial crisis in France. This is still a political crisis. We have seen the spread of bond yields between France and Germany widen, although it did actually tighten a little bit today when Lecornu signalled this morning that he had been making some progress in these talks. Realistically, looking at it for markets right now, nothing's really changed in the past week, or really since the middle of the summer, when the last Prime Minister, François Bayrou, proposed his budget. They're still in this phase of negotiation. There are still signals that a compromise could be found. When markets will run out of patience with France is very much an open question. You don't have the cliff edge of a government shutdown in France in the way that you do in the United States, because the way it works is the system runs into sort of keeping the lights on measures where taxes are collected and public services operated. That's not a situation any politicians want to be happening. It's not a situation the public wants to happen either. But the cliff edge moment looks that little bit further away, at least for now. The situation that markets were most worried about is what fresh elections could produce. National Assembly elections, or in an extreme case, a fresh presidential election. Both of those look off the cards this evening, but things are moving very quickly, and who Emmanuel Macron could pick in 48 hours' time is going to be a very interesting question.
So very quickly, if legislative elections would be unsettling to investors, I'm guessing that presidential elections, Macron actually resigning, as some in the opposition parties want him to do, is not something investors would welcome.
No, indeed. I mean, that would be a much more dramatic shift in France's both fiscal approach and some of those big, heavy issues like the pension reforms, which is the central thing politicians here are fighting over at the moment. If that were to be disrupted, that would change the fiscal perceptions of France. We've also got some ratings agency decisions to look out for too. A presidential election would be very dramatic. A National Assembly election would be less dramatic. And getting a new Prime Minister, well, that could produce another shrug from markets.